and welcome once again to Japan Expert Insights, or more Showtime at Japan Expert Insights. And with me is Maya over in Japan. Hello, good morning. Ohayo gozaimasu.
Ohayo gozaimasu and good morning.
And Ohayo gozaimasu to Jason Gray, who's going to be our guest today. And so we're going to talk to him in a couple moments. But first, we always like to talk to our audience in the beginning, just to kind of get everybody a chance to log in. And one of the things we want to talk about is, we started this in February, and we've just been so fortunate that the response has been overwhelming. And we do this for our audience. We do it for you. None of us are really, getting rich doing, actually, none of us are getting paid doing this. We do this because we love Japan. We love Japanese cinema. We love Japanese movies. And so we're at that point now where if you have an idea, if you're listening to the show, and we have a lot of longtime listeners now who've been with us since February of this year. If you have ideas, guests, things you'd like to see, don't hesitate to reach out. You can get a hold of us through LinkedIn or through our YouTube channels, and feel free to shoot us some ideas. Hey, if you want to be on the show and you think you should, you got something to say, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Very much so.
Because our show really, it's because of you, and it's for you, our listeners. And a lot of podcasts say that, but in this particular case, it's really true, because this is such a niche topic, Japan and Japanese entertainment, and it's a very trending topic. So we're just so thrilled to be a part of it. And I always thank Maya for roping me into this thing 5-6 months ago. So thank you, Maya.
You're very welcome, Michael, and thank you for agreeing to do it as well, because without you, it wouldn't have been possible to do it. Yeah.
Well, I have hair. That's the thing that's been talked about the last couple of weeks. It's like crazy hair. I still have my hair, and that's really what keeps this alive.
One thing that I want to say is that you still have your hair on, right? So it's not like you started the podcast and then your hair just disappeared, which is also good to know.
Yeah, sometimes you do the podcast and you lose your hair. Stressful.
Yeah.
So speaking of things that you're fortunate to have, I was able to catch a film called To the Ends of the Earth. Now, we here in the States have a thing called the Criterion Channel. It was on there at the time. I haven't checked to see if it's still on there. But it's a 2019 film. It was written and directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And it's a wonderful Japanese film, which, by the way, takes place in Uzbekistan. I know that's not word salad or world salad. That is true. And basically, the best way, I'm not giving anything away with the film, other than it's basically a former idol or a former singer. I think she's in real life. The Atsuko Maeda feel free to jump in on this, Jason, because you produced the film.
48 lead, one of the lead talents in AKB48, Atsuko Maeda is the lead actress. She's playing more like a wannabe singer. She hasn't really committed to that life yet in the film.
Yeah. And so
she's a host in the meantime. Yeah.
It's one of the great perseverance films, and it has one of the best endings I've ever seen in a film ever. And I don't just say that lightly. It's a wonderful ending. Very rarely I've ever seen a film where it kind of has this beautiful kind of slow Wim Wenders kind of pacing to it, and then all of a sudden it just ramps up at that end. And I'm not going to say anything more than that, other than it is so damn delightful. So if you're in the States or you're in Japan and you can, check this out, To the Ends of the Earth, 2019 film. It's a wonderful, delightful film. There's a lot of them that come out of Japan where you just feel happy you're alive that you got to see it. And this is definitely one of those movies. And we're so lucky to have one of the producers of that film, or the producer, Jason Gray.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, and joining us while you're kind of like, he's off the clock, and he decided to do the podcast anyway. So we're really thankful to have him on.
No, not at all. Thanks for having me. I am on vacation, but it's a pleasure to talk about this stuff. I've never been on a podcast, so I apologize in advance for lack of podcast etiquette. Swearing okay? Yes, no?
I don't know. We'll find out. I mean, honestly, we're still learning, and it's been 5 months in. We're on episode 16, and we're still learning as well. And by the way,
I'll keep it as clean as possible.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, and I think I dropped a couple. I think I dropped an F once in this. I can't remember. It's an exciting ride. So anyway, so you started now, Jason. If I remember right, you started as a translator for
No,
a long time ago. How did this work?
I started with no Japanese whatsoever, to be honest. So I came to Japan in 1998 for the first time, end of the 90s, right when the World Cup was on, the joint Japan-Korea World Cup, which was exciting times. At the same time, they were investigating all the cult links in Tokyo. You know, they were raiding all the computer shops and all that. How long have you guys been there since the 90s? I don't know. In Japan, did you first get there in the 90s, Maya?
No, I came to Japan in 2001. So
okay.
Yeah, I wasn't there immediately after the terrorist attack, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm still in Chicago. I'm still trying to get there. You know, anyone? Hello, I'll be there. But I have been there. I visited, but I'm based out of Chicago.
You lived there. I thought you lived there for a long time and went back to Chicago.
No, that is everyone always thinks that because I've studied the things. I've studied Japanese for so long. I have sort of in-depth knowledge, but I take that as a compliment. But no, I've never lived there.
You just lie. Just say, yeah, I've lived there for a long time. Because
I should have. Yeah, that's just it. They're like, no, I don't know. That stuff tends to bite you in the butt in this day and age. I don't know. Anytime you say
But Michael, yes, Michael, you have worked with a number of Japanese companies in the United States, so it doesn't count exactly as being in Japan for a long time, but you have an idea of how Japanese organizations work and, how communication goes with Japanese people, right? Colleagues and partners, which is not a small thing at all.
Well, we're working on it. But back to Jason, because his story is very exciting, because he's living the dream. So let's go back to so you started in 1998 and that was like what 3 years after the whole Tokyo underground bombings too. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a strange time in Tokyo, and I didn't speak a word other than konnichiwa and arigato. And I went there on a whim. You know, I had always been interested in Japan. My girlfriend in Toronto, who's now my wife and lead producer on our films as well, Eiko. I met her. She was really the first Japanese person I met and knew intimately. And then watching a lot of Japanese cinema in Toronto. Toronto Film Festival, I was spoiled. I grew up with that festival in my backyard. For me, it was normal, but I realized later it's one of the world's great film festivals. Cinematheque, I watched a lot of the Japanese classics. So kind of had these influences about Japan. My roommate in Toronto moved to Japan before I did. So I had a personal, a guy on the phone saying, and I literally the telephone back then telling me, you got to get over here. You got to get over to Japan, check this place out. So I had multiple influences that brought me in 98, but that was all kind of a blur. That was really just 1 year of chaos, I guess you could say. And then went back to Toronto for a bit and then came back in 2001, like Maya, the same year. Since then, uninterrupted in Japan. So how many years is that total?
That's 24 years uninterrupted. Yeah,
so half my life in Japan.
Yeah, that's So obviously it stuck because you're there. So how did you? So obviously you didn't start as a producer, but you obviously had a path into the career. And everybody, it's interesting because when we talk to everybody, there's no real set path. Everyone has a different way in. So what was your way in?
I want to repeat that because, given talks before, and the path is so-called path. Everyone's is completely different, even in the same industry, even within the narrow field of live action cinema, in Japan, that path. Everyone I know who works in Japan, who's non-Japanese, incredibly different paths. So I guess mine was, I was already a film person. I went to film school for 4 years in Toronto. I made short films. I was a movie guy for quite a while, since my teens. The dream was to be a director, the cliche, but that was the dream. Met my wife in Toronto, and she started working at the Toronto. I didn't work at the Toronto Film Festival. She got a job at the Toronto Film Festival. They had a special Japan year. It was like a perspective on new Japanese cinema, and they needed someone to help handle the publicity. So I actually helped her get a job at TIFF. And meanwhile, I didn't have a job in film in Toronto because it was, the university I went to didn't really have a placement program where they would help you find jobs after graduating, especially not as a director. Like everyone wants, you don't just graduate and become a director.
Mhm.
So I flailed around for a few years. I did some graphic design, published a fanzine on movies, literally stapled together. I don't know if you guys know about fanzines from back in the
Yeah,
day.
I was part of that. I grew up in the 80s, 90s. So yeah. Yeah.
You did
Literally, it was a
art.
very DIY, way of doing things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So the DNA of film was always there. But so I come to Japan for 1 year in '98. I don't do anything in film, like nothing.
Yeah.
Teaching English and just night clubbing and all that silliness. And then 2001, I come back and I'm like, okay, I want to make a real effort to work in cinema. I was serious about working in film in Japan, just by virtue of loving the films and wanting to be involved. And I guess in my mind, I thought, well, if I can be involved, I mean, there's not that many non-Japanese working in cinema in Japan. So I thought, I don't know, maybe somehow I can fill a gap. I'm trying to remember my mindset at the time. I was obviously very naive, thinking, oh, I'll do something interesting as a non-Japanese in Japan, based in Japan, in Japanese cinema. And it started off with native checks, not translation, but native checking existing translations. I'm sure you guys have done this kind of work before. You polish it, you sometimes rewrite it. And this was for film festivals, so their catalogs or their flyers, and I was happy. It was like a little connection to the films. I could actually participate in a small way and help polish these publicity materials so they were ready for the public. So that was really the first kind of job. And then, as I started learning the language, well, what would happen is my wife would get really tired of me asking about what this meant and why this this phrasing was this way and what is this kanji. It was a nightmare, to be honest. So I had to learn the language, to stop pestering her.
Right.
And that was actually a good trial by fire. Simultaneously, she helped me with business Japanese and proper communication with people. So to this day, my Japanese it's not street Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
It's proper, I guess, which has helped. But anyway, I started learning language. I started translating films. Started kind of with my wife together. We would translate movies, subtitle them specifically. So I subtitled many movies over the years. And eventually I could handle, the work by myself, and I would just have a final check at the end, to make sure. Sometimes with the directors, which was the best. If it was a director that knew enough English to check the nuance I was conveying, and sometimes correcting that or catching errors. The subject, is always a nightmare. Sometimes you get the subject wrong when you're translating Japanese. Yeah.
There's a certain nuance to it. I mean, a real nuance to it. That's why like AI still has difficulty, although it's getting better. It's not there, and I'm reminded of that because sometimes when I see there's two different levels of I think translation. One is just kind of like just a direct English translation. Another where the English is trying to sort of convey the essence of the sentence. So sometimes when you're doing it that way, the sentence might seem a little more wandering, maybe is the best word, kind of the easiest word, but it's really trying to capture the essence of what the statement's supposed to be. So for a lot of our viewers here, listeners who don't know, it's not a direct one-to-one translation many times.
High context language, obviously. I don't know how AI will ever handle, like if you have a scene and a character says, "Otsukare-sama deshita," that could be up to 10 different choices in English, depending on what happened before that, where the scene is set, the tone of the character's voice. So AI would have to literally watch the movie, absorb it, understand the movie as a whole, or at least the scene, and then spit out a translation. So until that day, I don't think film or novel translation, creative translation is going to be. It's going to be a while before AI.
It is, yeah.
What do you think? What do you guys think?
My brother works in that. He says, yeah, he describes AI as like a child in that show Old Enough, where, you know, they send the kid to the grocery store. It's a Japanese show, by the way, kind of fun for all my friends in the States. It's on Netflix. They send like these little kids to do like adult errands. A lot of times they do it. You know, Japanese kids are pretty bright, but sometimes they get lost. Sometimes they do different things. And he said, you know, AI is kind of like that. You know, it does get things right, but it oftentimes wanders and get things wrong. And it's at that level, and it's probably going to be that way for a bit, especially now. My phrase has always been, the internet's great at content and terrible at context. It's getting better, but there's just way too many cross-cultural, you know, anomalies. I don't know what would be an appropriate word for that. Anomalies, like something like that, where it's just like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with you both that it's going to be a while until AI is able, you know, or we are able to rely on AI for that. And maybe we're never going to actually be able to rely on this entirely, because I know that people say, and companies that work in the field, they say we have created AI that works, that mimics the brain function of people, and so on and so on. And I still don't get it. I don't believe that it's really, they have get to the experience, the level of experience an adult person has. And right, because it's just a different thing. And at the same time, there are so many, basically AI is created, mostly the data that AI uses is collected from the English-speaking world. And because of that, there is a lot of biases, cultural biases there as well. And when we talk about, Asian countries and Asian content, it's not that there isn't that much there yet, right? And so, yeah, because of that, I believe that the cultural biases that AI comes with are very, very difficult to overcome. And because of this, Jason, what you said, it's going to be a while before we can see AI doing a really good translation of, between different languages and cultures.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to, as I say, read the novel, so to speak, absorb it, or watch the entire film, absorb the film, the screenplay, what have you, and understand it holistically. And then, even then, you know, how would it judge an actor's tone, for example? Like, I'll change my translation based on the delivery of the line, not just the line itself, but how they say it. Do they spit it out? Do they whisper it? Could be the same words. How does AI these things? So I think translators, rightfully so, are worried at the moment. You know, they're very concerned about this field being eliminated. I think in the field of technical translation, or maybe more, things like that, it could be dangerous. But in the realm of creative, you know, they have for novel translation. They literally give prizes now for translators.
Indeed, yeah. You know, the other day I noticed something different, because I wanted to get a particular, let's say, text from AI, ChatGTP, it was ChatGTP, and I spent maybe about 15 minutes explaining the context. And then I thought, well, I don't have to spend 15 minutes on explaining the context to AI. Instead of doing that, I just can sit down and get the text myself, because it would take me 15 minutes to get to that, to that final product. So it's really funny how I came to that realization. So basically, instead of explaining the context, just go do it, right? And it would be probably better in terms of, let's say, ideas incorporated in that text than what ChatGTP could give me. So in this sense, I entirely agree with you, Jason, that, most of the time, basically, the translators who work in this field, in the creative field, they don't have to fear about their jobs, because our brains are there, they're wired to read the context and to basically extract what it is from that context that we need. And once again, AI is not there yet.
And one more thought on this before we get to Loaded Films, which was founded in 2011, because I really want to talk about Loaded Films too. But the fact that you have a Jeopardy problem with AI, because in Jeopardy, what I mean by that is when they had the AI compete for Jeopardy in 2008, it won, but when it was wrong, it was really, really off. Now, if you're doing Jeopardy or creativity, that's okay, but that's why you don't want to put AI in charge of everything. So I always tell my creatives, I say, well, where should we go? I said, well, you think less being a musician and more being a conductor, because AI can be a great tool for a lot of things, but you still need somebody to orchestrate everything. So a lot of my creative friends, I say, this is just another tool in the tool set, and think more like, don't worry about being the best musician in your role, but best musician in your row, whatever, like just be the guy who conducts, use all the different tools. But anyway, that's it's really, really fascinating where all this is going. And I think one last thing to wrap this up with this part here, we're in the right spot because we're doing something that's cross-cultural. So I think I think Jason's got a long career still ahead of you. So
cheers. Yeah. So translation was the beginning. And back then it was very analog, by the way. There was no AI. There was no machine translation. It was using dictionaries, and they would send me a VHS tape of the cut of the film, sometimes unfinished post-production. They would send me a printed screenplay, kansei daihon, finished with the handwritten corrections, that were made during shooting. It was very, very analog. So I started in that. That was in the early mid 2000s. I was translating a lot, and then became a journalist after that. Going back to the point about blogging, and no podcast back then, but there was blogging, and I would write a lot about Japanese cinema online, films I saw, what I was working on. And then I got kind of noticed they needed someone to cover the Japanese film industry, the business side of the industry. So I started writing for Screen International, which is it's kind of like the British equivalent of Variety or Hollywood Reporter. So I was the Japan correspondent for them. That was in 2006. I started with them, still translating at the same time, teaching English part-time, like a few days a week. So my brain was flipping between teaching, translating, writing articles. Man, I couldn't do that.
You think that experience helped you transition into the film? Yeah, I was going to say, because there had to be certain nuances you must have picked up in the language or just in the culture that you may not have had.
I was like multitasking from different angles, and my wife Aiko was still working at film festivals, and she was publicizing films like we'll get into loaded films later, but she would publicize Japanese films and sometimes go overseas with the directors and handle their interpretation, or pitch the media stories about those films that were screening so that they would get coverage. And then she worked at Studio Ghibli for a while in the international department. So we were both kind of like having our film careers, not working together, but in parallel, and we would help each other, cross-cultural, as you say, bilingual, bicultural in the Japanese industry.
Yeah. So how do you go from doing this to starting a film production company? Because you and your wife started in 2011, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, correct. Not long after the disaster, Tohoku.
Yeah.
Let me think. Yeah, we were freelance. We were both freelance for quite a long time, and we just felt like we should put our skills and knowledge together, sort of combine everything and do it under a corporate, like an actual entity. Because with freelance work in Japan, I'm sure you guys have done both freelance and professional. Sorry, under a company rather than just freelance. Freelancers are professional. I didn't mean it that way.
No offense taken. Yeah.
But as you know, when you're freelance, there's a limit to how much control you have over things, and sometimes I don't want to say respect. Maybe that's too much to say, but you're very convenient for other people. When
Indeed.
you're freelance.
Yes.
Right. So we thought, why not start this company And luckily, my wife's father, my father-in-law, who unfortunately passed away last year, he was like kind of our dai senpai for like business. So he would, his background was in running his company, and he knew a lot about how to deal with banks. In his young career, he worked at a bank, Japanese bank. So he had a lot of knowledge about like how to run businesses and do things in Japan, which was invaluable. So he helped us, set up this little company. And the idea was to offer a suite of services, like a package to Japanese film producers and production companies. So we can take your film, we can write English press releases because I had the journalism skills. We can translate your film, we can subtitle it, we can create press materials, we can help with international film festival strategy. So we can, based on the type of film you've produced, we can discuss and help you choose what film festivals to aim for, or what what kind of overseas profile your film potentially could have. Then if we were selected, we would sometimes go with them overseas and handle the local publicity and interpretation. So it was like a end-to-end, group of services. Sounded pretty good, but they didn't want to pay for it. They didn't think it was worth. No, I don't mean free, but I mean they didn't see the inherent value in a more global approach to their films, because Japan is such a self-sufficient market, right, for cinema.
And we've heard this from plenty of guests, like especially in the 10s. It obviously has changed over the last 10, 15 years, but you're right, at that time period. Yeah, that tracks.
So they thought it was interesting, but they weren't investing in the future of their films in terms of, the global profile of those films.
Right.
They were more like an interesting, this could be like a little boost for the film temporarily. They didn't look at it as like a legacy thing, So that didn't work that well financially. But it got us into, we had a lot of relationships with even more companies than we had before. But, eventually we thought, well, rather than, servicing these films that exist, we kind of got a bit disillusioned with that. Why don't we produce our own films? So that brings us to 2015 is when we started producing our own films in-house. 10 years ago.
Right. So, because one of my questions to you was going to be, how did you get into the industry? Because this industry is really gated so very much. Like, it's very difficult for independent companies to get into it, and because of the way it works, right? And then the Japanese film producers, there are consortiums there are committees, there is this and that. And so for smaller companies, it's so close to impossible. But you answered the question already, so it's fascinating to see that there is always a possibility, right? There is an opportunity, and never take a no for answer. That's one of the things that Jeff actually said last 2 weeks ago when we had him on the podcast, and he's watching now as well. So never take no for an answer, right? Yeah.
He was in a recent film, right? Wasn't he? He's in Renoir, or was he in?
In Renoir, our latest production. He's in one sequence, and it's very funny. I won't spoil what it is, but people will be able to see it soon in North America. We'll talk about that. Yeah.
We're going to talk about that, yeah. So we're getting into it right now, because right now in your story, you're at Loaded Films, and then you start. So obviously, and if you look. I tell like the people are watching, you can check out their website, which I'm trying to remember. I had it up, and of course I don't have it up anymore. But it's at what's the website for Loaded Films? I was trying to remember.
Loadedfilms.jp.
Loadedfilms.jp, and it's wonderful. Plan 75 is available here, I think, in the States on the Criterion channel
and other streamers.
Yeah. So so these films are very accessible. And they're also very, very good. So I guess the first thing I'd ask you is getting kind of a little bit of what Maya was saying about, like, you're carving your own path. Do you feel like you're kind of in the right place at the right time at some point, where you were maybe a little early and then people didn't see the value, and then all of a sudden it switched and then people started seeing the value, where was there a little bit of serendipitousness to how that played out?
I believe so. It happened kind of in slow motion, though. I won't say. Well, to be honest, probably up until Plan 75. Because we had done our first film, quickly to recap, was Magic Kimono, which was the first ever Japan Latvia co-production. So we shot in Kobe and Riga, which are sister cities, with a Japanese cast in Riga. Kaori Momoi and Issei Ogata, two very famous actors. So that was our first crazy splash. We jumped on board that. That was an existing project that we came on board as Japanese co-producers. And then we did 10 Years Japan, which was an anthology film, 5 short films by young directors depicting Japan 10 years in the future, imagining what Japan might be. And the opening segment of that anthology was Plan 75, the short film version. So we had produced the Plan 75 short with Chie Hayakawa. And also the final film in that anthology was by Kei Ishikawa, who has a new film, A Pale View of Hills. That was at Cannes as well this year. Very good director. We're working with him. So we established some relationships with young directors through 10 Years Japan, which was a co-pro with Hong Kong. And then To the Ends of the Earth, was our third film, which you mentioned, Michael. Thanks for your comments on that. Completely shot in Uzbekistan, the first ever Japan-Uzbekistan feature film co-production. So we were doing our thing. We were doing co-productions. For us, it was very natural to do co-productions. Again, my wife being Japanese, and I'm a Westerner, and this bicultural thing, and bilingual, I guess you could say, and just having they didn't need us to do domestic films. Let me cut to the chase. There's so many producers. There's 600 films released a year in Japan, Japanese local productions, 600 on average in the theaters. They don't need number 601 from us. So we decided to do co-productions was our focus. But honestly, we didn't get noticed, and the value of co-productions wasn't really noticed until Plan 75. And honestly, that's probably because it was a hit. It was a hit in Japan. So companies, including the big studios, took notice of that film's success. And this new business model of co-funding, co-financing, but also the cultural exchange, creative exchange behind the filmmaking, behind the production. They took notice of that with Plan 75 in particular. And now, I don't want to say our film was the only one that sparked that trend. It's not, but it's kind of a hot thing now. Co-producing,
not just co-producing, but you're also, because I believe To the Ends of the Earth was also, you worked with Uzbekistan, like the country, or they were just, you seem like you worked also with other countries in those earlier films, or at least their organizations as well as Japanese.
You're right. So with Magic Kimono, we were, the Riga, the government, the city government, as well as the national government of Latvia supported that film. It was 20th year of friendship between Riga and Kobe. There was that element, maybe.
Right.
25th year of diplomatic relations. The film with Uzbekistan was the same thing. It was commemorating maybe 25 years of diplomatic relations between Japan and Uzbekistan as countries. And they wanted to do something. They wanted to do some kind of creative endeavor to commemorate this 25 years.
Right.
Yeah. Somehow it came to us, and then do you want to do a film? Yes, we said yes, but not. They wanted us to do kind of more of a World War II thing, because there were Japanese soldiers that were interned in Uzbekistan at one point, and there was kind of a very interesting history, but we don't do that kind of genre. That's not our zone, I guess. So we said, well, if we can do a modern drama, then we'll do it. And then we went to Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who we had worked with as translator, interpreter, publicist. We had known him since the late 90s from the Toronto Film Festival. So again, the relationship, going back to what Maya said, the relationships are the real key. These relationships you build and the time you put into them can pay off later. We weren't thinking that way, but it ended up that way.
Right.
Right. So he agreed. We went to him and we said, you wouldn't want to do a movie in Uzbekistan by chance, would you? And he wrote back within hours and he said, absolutely yes. because he was
Okay.
already with
Mm.
history of Central Asia and the Timur Emperor, that era, and Genghis Khan and all that kind of history. He was very familiar with, and he said, "I've always dreamed of doing a movie in Uzbekistan." It was very surreal. So then he started developing the script, and we would go on trips there to investigate, learn about the culture, but ultimately, yeah, we decided it should be a film like kind of a fish out of water, for lack of a better term, with this character, this TV crew led by Atsuko Maeda coming to Uzbekistan to film kind of a lighthearted segment about the culture there, the food, but she actually goes on this quite deep emotional personal transformation there while not being understood. She kind of ends up in situations where she feels she's disconnected from home and from her safety net, and that kind of leads to this, as Michael said, I won't give it away, but this ending is kind of
very cathartic ending. Yeah. And it's what I loved about the film. I'm sorry, I'm just going to praise this before we get to Renoir, which is just coming out at Cannes Film Festival. Which, by the way, we'll talk more about that in a moment. But the what I loved about that film, To the Ends of the Earth, is because it worked on so many levels. It felt like a Japanese film, but it also felt like an Eastern European film. Because I watch a lot of Kiyoshi, and he's Polish, but still, it did seem to be cut from that cloth a little bit. I did see some Kiyoshi in that, but at the same time, very Japanese. And also too, in terms of like the character development for female empowerment, in a way, it seemed very organic. And the character who's sort of, she's trying to figure her way out in a very unknown country. And also the fact that it addresses a lot of these sort of cultural differences and does so in a very gentle but honest way. That sometimes, without getting too much, there's a scene, where they're trying to figure out what to do with this goat. Because Jeffrey Rowe just commented that Loaded Films is the goat. Well, this film's kind of the goat too, because it involves it. But the fact that the characters are trying to determine like what's right and what's wrong. I think it's the police officer, or it was the chief. There's a scene, I'm trying to remember, it was the police commissioner when she's sitting there and he says, if we don't learn to trust each other or something, then how is this ever going to work? And it's a scene that gives you chills, and it's a wonderful film. So yeah, I think that's in the end like where I got into it, which is why I can't wait to see Noir. And because the film works on so many levels, and you don't really see that. A lot of films work on 1 or 2 levels. That film works on like 7 or 8 levels. And
Kurosawa-san is known for that. I mean, if you know his cinema, there are so many elements operating at the same time, layers. You can watch the films on many levels. You can watch them as cinephiles and really focus on the directing and the framing and the pacing and the mise en scène, or you can enjoy them as just movie fans for the main elements of the genre he's working in. So he's a master. He is, and we understood that really well being with him for a couple months in Uzbekistan and just watching him work. And he's a real gentleman of cinema too. He never raises his voice. There's no conflicts on set. I can't praise him enough. And he's a master for a reason. It's not only the films that he makes, but who he is as a person. He's a true sensei, of Japanese cinema. But to your point, we thought, honestly, we were making something that was, as you say, like a European sort of art film set in Uzbekistan with the Japanese characters as the lead characters. And so we thought this would appeal to Cannes, where Kurosawa-san had been many times with many films. But in the end, we didn't get selected to Cannes, and we ended up having a great premiere in Locarno, another great film festival in Switzerland.
Right, yeah.
The closing film in the Piazza Grande, which is 8,000 seats, under the stars outside. So everything worked out in the end. But my point is that it was actually American audiences, which were not the audiences we had in mind whatsoever. Sadly, but in retrospect, America has been, and exactly how you're speaking about the film, this is the audience that really warmed to that film and loves it to this day. So it's you don't always know where your films will find their audiences, especially when you're doing productions. Yeah, it's surprising sometimes. So thanks to our American friends for championing this film.
So Plan 75 is your first hit in Japan. Did that take you by surprise? Or did you feel like we were due?
Well, the buzz was high. You know, there was a lot of buzz because we got into Cannes, and we had the lead actress was a legendary studio actress, Chie, who was with Shochiku for so many years and did all the Otoko wa Tsurayo, series.
Right.
What's the English title? I'm spacing out now.
I don't know the English title.
Okay, sorry.
I've watched only the Japanese, but it's
It's a long-running series of
Wonderful.
TV show and movies, and she was, played the younger sister in this series. So anyway, the point being, she was a legend. So the fact that she had appeared in this basically independent kind of art film, that was already big news. And then getting into Cannes was another big boost. And then we won a prize in Cannes. Our director, Chie Hayakawa, she won Golden Camera Special Mention. Golden Camera is the award for first-time filmmaker. It's only for their first films. Camera d'Or is the French, but it's the Golden Camera Special Mention. So as you know, in Japan, when you release a film, if you have awards that happen overseas, that can really boost the profile and the excitement around the film. So we had all that, but nonetheless, we didn't know that it would really catch on the way it did. So this was just after COVID really calmed down, and audiences were coming back to the cinemas to see the Top Gun, the reimagining. It wasn't a remake, but it was like a reboot, I guess. And we were in cinemas at the same time. So it was a surreal situation where we had all these articles talking about Plan 75 on one end of the spectrum and Top Gun on the other.
Right, yes.
Sort of like counter programming in that sense, yeah.
Exactly, and people were going to both on the opposite end of the spectrum. And credit to our partner on that film, HappyNet Phantom Studios, who were a co-investor and distributor. They had this strategy where they released Plan 75 both in multiplexes and art house cinemas, the mini theater track. So it was a dual track release where we had the art film, the cinephile, the hardcore auteur cinema fans, and then we also had the mainstream fans, luckily piling in to see it. Probably also the concept, obviously, this sort of semi-dystopian concept that really connected with audiences in Japan. Is a super aging society, rapidly graying society. This hit home, I think, with a lot of viewers, older viewers too. So it's just a perfect storm, I guess you could say. Plan 75, yeah.
Right.
And then co-productions, like people started looking at our business model and like, how did they fund a film by a first-time director for over $1 million, which is rare, for a first-time in Japan, with the co-financing.
Yeah, that's a good question. Everyone's going to ask. Could you say how did you manage that?
Well, Chie, there were a couple things. Her first ever short film called Niagara was in the Cinefondation program in Cannes. So that's a program. Cinefondation is for film school graduation films, kind of specifically from around the world. So that was in 2014. And then my wife Eiko was handling publicity there for another Japanese film, and they met there. And then when 10 Years Japan came up, we contacted Chie and said, do you have an idea for a film set 10 years in the future? Like, do you have an idea that would work? And she said, I have this script called Plan 75. She actually had a feature version of the script, but we made a short version of it.
Yeah.
That was received very well, especially her segment of 10 Years Japan. And then, so there was kind of a foundation under Plan 75, and then we joined what's called like a project market, where film festivals hold, sometimes as a sidebar event, where an industry event where you go and pitch projects to potential international partners. So we did that with Plan 75, and we thought it was a very domestic. I guess honestly, we thought it was more of a domestic story, but we thought, yeah, let's try let's take the temperature of overseas producers and potential co-producers. And the response was very strong. You know, they saw the universality in it almost before we did. We're speaking to people in Italy and France, and they have their own, you know, similar issues with the graying society and this sort of
Right.
and so having COVID, you know, there was COVID happening at the same time as we were developing the film. There's a very much a harshness towards the weaker people in society, an intolerance of people who need total assistance from society. It's like, well, we have to keep living our lives. Why are we burdening ourselves by supporting this generation that no longer is useful? It's a very harsh, you know, sort of outlook, and COVID sort of crystallized that. I don't want to thank COVID for anything, but I think it gave our movie Plan 75 some sort of further gravity, and also it gave us time, because we couldn't work, you know, during the height of COVID. It gave us time to develop the screenplay more and more, and we eventually got our French partner on board, because we wanted to do post-production in France, specifically for the quality of the post-production there, the sound, you know, the director wanted to work with a French editor, a specific editor of French cinema. So when you say how, it's not just like a frivolous thing like, yeah, let's just co-produce. It's actually, there's a lot of sort of elements in the DNA of each project that, same with Uzbekistan, with To the Ends of the Earth, that make sense or are like the foundation of the relationships, and spending time to build those relationships and then working together to make the film.
Right.
It's like one of my buddies, Doc Kane, who I was working with for a little bit, said like people don't understand how hard it is to make a movie, even a bad movie. Now you make good movies, which I think honestly that's part of the success, because you make good movies that are unique movies that have their own voice, and that's people ask like, what's the secret to like having success in film? I'll start by making a good movie, and it's hard to make films. There are so many different. It's like 8-dimensional chess. I mean, because there's so many different things that has to click in the right order, and not only that, as a producer, you have to understand, you know, okay, what am I feeling about this? And a lot of it ends up becoming maybe instinctive, despite all the knowledge you've created for yourself, to be like, okay, we need to feel this out. We need to put the script more. It's a very multi-dimensional process.
Yeah.
Is key. And I think Japan has no lack of talent. It's actually infinite amount of talent in Japan. But from the producing side, the one thing I would say is lacking, if I generalize, is the amount of development time and the amount of effort put into the development of the scripts. You know, sometimes and we've been guilty of it too. You know, with our early films, honestly, they should have been rewritten and developed further and worked on further before we jumped in head first. So, if at all possible, I would say anyone who's producing films, spend time developing your projects, and don't just stop developing when everyone is like at the okay. Yeah, are you okay with this draft? Everyone's okay. You don't want to just be okay. You want to go beyond that and really push it to the heights that it can reach. And I think if nothing else, we've done that with Chie in particular, with Plan 75 and now Renoir. And
now, because now we go into, because it's funny, because I wanted to get you on the show a couple months ago, but you're busy at Cannes. And I said, well, should we put you in now, later? And he said, well, maybe just do it after we do some of these film festivals, because then I can give some insight on that. And so here we are. And so, yes, so you do Renoir, or that's the film that's out right now. And let's talk a little bit about that and the experience you had at Cannes. I always say Cannes, like I'm such an American. You know, like I went over to the Cannes Film Festival, but it's Cannes. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, what was your experience? What do you want to talk about? Since we waited till you got back, what did you want to talk about with that? What was it like?
Well, first of all, there's the process of submitting the film to Cannes. And there's sort of two scenarios. Like with Plan 75, we didn't know, what was going to happen. I mean, yes, Chie had her short film there back in 2014, but basically we're starting from scratch and submitting the film for consideration and hoping for the best. And then we were dumbfounded at being selected to the Un Certain Regard category, which is kind of like the main selection sidebar. Yeah. and winning the prize, as we said. So now when we come with Renoir, it's a different story because the programmers there, they're waiting for the second film. They're already tracking films by directors who've had their first or second film in Cannes. They're actively tracking, the latest films. And in parallel to that, we have our French partners, our French co-producers who are acquiring funding from the National Cinema Agency there, the CNC. We have those elements in place. We have a French co-producer, Arte, which is a major TV cable operator in France. We have a distributor on board. So it's like we're kind of building, we have these building blocks that we're putting together successfully, but ultimately it comes down to what the Cannes programmers feel about this film. So the pressure is particularly with Cannes, waiting for that answer is, it's very intense because it can really change the fortunes of a film. And sometimes, a film, with like To the Ends of the Earth, in retrospect, it was probably better it wasn't in Cannes because of the type of film it is. I mean, it may have not been received as well as it was with its ultimate journey, compared to its ultimate. But with Renoir in particular, it was like, we really want to be back in Cannes. And if we're blessed enough in competition this time, so we didn't know what was going to happen. And that email came in and we were welcomed to competition and we were obviously ecstatic. Our international sales agent, Goodfellas, who's a major sales agent in France, they were happy about it. They were part of that as well, part of helping make that happen. And yeah, it was incredible. We had a daytime red carpet screening under the sun. The image is usually in the evening with the evening dresses and stuff, but our screening was in the daytime because we have an 11-year-old lead actress in our film, Yui Suzuki, this incredible new actress who's the protagonist of Renoir. So we had the screening in the daytime.
Right.
And we walked the red carpet and had the screening in the Grand Lumiere Cinema, which is 2,300 seats. This is a palace, a real true cinema palace in world cinema. And to screen in there was it was surreal. Yeah, that's the best word I can say. And we had a delegation of about 36, 38 people in this like delegation block of seats in our tuxedos and dresses, and people from all our co-producing countries. I want to mention, by the way, Japan, France, Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, Qatar. So it's a 6-country co-production. Very complex. Renoir.
Now
we felt.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
No.
Whoever now you said you did graphic design. So did you work on these posters? Because I have to admit, the poster design and the photography for Renoir just makes you want to see it. That is just such an incredible photo of the young girl, and just the way the blue sky yellow type. It's one of the much better movie posters I've seen in a long time.
It's funny you mention that because we have a genius stills photographer who named Miki-san. He does incredible still photography on the set. But that image on the poster was actually a frame grab because we had a sequence shot in the Philippines, which you'll all realize when you see the film. And so that was actually a frame grab, what you see on the poster from the actual footage of the little girl dancing on the deck of this boat with the blue sky. So thanks for the praise on the poster. What was I going to say? I don't do any design, but I still subtitle my own films. So like Renoir, Plan 75, I do handle the English subtitles in-house. So I still translate even now.
Yeah. So if you don't mind me going back to Plan 75, we have a question from Jeffrey Rowe. And he said, Jason, good to hear about your approach to financing Plan 75. In your experience, how do you balance private investment with public funds like VIPO or foreign tax incentives in your financing plans? So this is a very specific question. I hope you don't mind answering it.
Yeah, that's a pretty deep question. But basically, each co-producer in their home country is like the delegate producer in terms of raising that public funding in their territory and being responsible for the applications, So each co-producer is in a way their own lead producer in their territory. So with France, the producer there, for example, on Plan 75 and Renoir both, they are responsible for applying to the CNC, the French Cinema Agency, in collaboration with us. So we work on the application together, but ultimately they translate it into French, and they put together their package, and they do the, they deal with the agencies directly there. In Japan, obviously, we apply to Bunkacho, the Ministry of Culture, for their international co-production subsidy, and we follow their rules here and their timing. Where it gets tricky is the timing sometimes doesn't always synchronize. So the deadlines in France or other territories may not sync perfectly with Japan. So it's really important to come together with your co-producers and plan things out and, understand each other, be on the same page in each of your territories, understand, what the requirements are, what restrictions are in each co-producing territory. It's very complex, but the private equity and public funding balance is also quite tricky because in Asia, as Jeffrey probably knows, in Japan and other parts of Asia, it's equity, it's cash. Basically, you're producing money mainly with cash, aside from the Bunkacho rebate, for example. But upfront, you're outlaying cash. Whereas in France, for example, and most of Europe, it's all public funded. So producers are not risking hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own money. They are depending on public funding. So aside from the technical challenges, there's also a psychological gap sometimes. It's like, well, in Asia, we're risking a lot of money up front. And whereas in Europe, they're working equally hard, but they're working from a different standpoint, a different mindset. So there's also, you have to understand how each territory works, not only your own territory, but each partner has to understand each other's set of circumstances. So the relationship, the time spent on knowing your co-producers is the key to doing co-productions, both in Japan.
Right. I also understand that time is very important. You need to invest your time into understanding them, but also flexibility is very important as well, and open-mindedness, because sometimes we run into people who are not willing to understand the specifics of that particular market or the particular territory, as you call them, right? And so being open-minded, being flexible, being willing to accommodate those specifics is very important, I believe. And actually, I noticed one thing, that people, let's say the owners and founders of independent production or film producing companies here in Japan, most of them come from, how can I put it, international marriages or partnerships, because I can see that Jeffrey, once again, his partner is Japanese, and then your partner, your wife, is Japanese as well. And we've got a lot of other people here working on the intersection of, let's say, cultures, right? So do you think that this has been one of the reasons for your success as well? Because quite a few times you mentioned your wife today, right? And I can get that there is something there, but I don't know how you feel about this.
Well, I mean, to be honest, she's really the delegate producer. If there's one producer among, for example, on Renoir, there's 5 lead producers, there's 8 co-producers, there are executive producers, we have an associate, but in terms of the producers, the people that actually lead the production, she is the delegate producer. So it's her that, when we go to Japanese banks together, it's her that communicates mainly with the banks, signing documents, signing co-production agreements with the Japanese partners here. Whereas I might handle the drafting of contracts with our international sales agent or our co-producing partners. I do all that work. So we're both doing legal work. We're both doing creative work. She has her own vision for the film with Chie. She had a very close connection, both Plan 75 and Renoir. Producers should have a vision too, not only a director.
Right.
It's not
right.
creative vision. producer also needs to have their own creative vision for the film that's in sync, complements the director's vision. So it's a dual or triple vision for a film. So she handles, Eiko handles a lot of these things. She's really the face of, like Loaded Films as a Japanese entity, and together we are. But she's amazing at leveraging all her skills, from the past, whether it's travel. She was a travel agent, so that comes in handy. She's a publicist, professional publicist for films. That comes in handy. She's done interpretation work. I've done my translation work. As I said, my journalism, my cinema background, making films, and filmmaker in my background. So I don't know. It's very organic, to be honest. But in retrospect, yes, I don't think we would be where we are without the composition of our relationship and how we've worked together over these past 10 years in particular, 10 years of producing films. It's intense. There's
Yes.
there's no off and on time. So sometimes it's I won't lie, it's a very intense partnership, but
Right.
that's what we do.
So I know we're getting over on time here. I do want to talk about our comments, just because we had some really interesting ones, and our fan base was just we're so lucky to have them. But real quickly, to circle back on RENOIR, it's going to be at Melbourne, and where can people see this? What's the future plans for RENOIR?
Yeah, the immediate future that I can mention is Melbourne for those in Australia, Melbourne International Film Festival in competition. We've got Toronto International Film Festival, which I'm happy about because that's where I'm from originally. So it's always a privilege to be able to show films we've produced, at my home, my hometown film festival. That'll be in Toronto Film Festival runs from September 4th to 14th. So it'll screen on the 6th, I think, is the North American premiere. And then I can't reveal when and which festival, but there will be a US premiere coming this year in the fall. So look for that news. People in the States will be able to see it. And then we have, some other festivals coming later in the year in Europe, in the Middle East even. And then, of course, next year will be eventually the streaming, all of the other platforms where the film be seen. But in the near future, and then of course in Japan, it's still in release in the cinemas. We released on June 20th, so it's still in the cinemas in Japan. We did actually have some English subtitle screenings, going back to subtitles. We always, for our films, we make sure that we always have at least several screenings with English subtitles of these Japanese films. We do for the foreign residents in Japan or people visiting, because I remember back in the day, there were no subtitles. It was like being in an ocean without a glass of water, so to speak. So I don't forget that people in Japan, living in Japan also, especially new to Japan, they need English subtitles on Japanese films as well. So that's RENOIR. Look for it. It's an incredible, very personal film starring this unbelievable 11-year-old actress, Yui Suzuki. I think the world is falling in love with her. Cannes mentioned her as one of the 10 talents to watch, 10 young acting talents to watch. One of their
and Lily Frankie's in it, which he's one of my favorites. If I see him in something, he was in Shoplifters, whatever. Anytime he's in something, it's going to be good. Yeah, he
plays the father, legendary actor. You're right. He's been in many Koreeda, Hirokazu films. So mother is played by Hikaru Ishida. She's a great Hikaru Ishida, great actress. Yeah, it's a family drama, but with a very, very unique worldview on death and childhood experiences, and it's both dark and light and happy and bittersweet, and it's like really a mix of emotion, and it's auteur cinema. I mean, this is Chie's worldview, undiluted, unfiltered. Yeah,
I think that's what people are also craving now. We're going back, and now to cycle before we get to our comments. We're talking like how we came from when you used to have to staple the fanzines together. I think a certain generation, there's a tactile sensibility to filmmaking that I think had disappeared for a bit, and it seems to be coming back in full force. So once again, it seems like RENOIR is sort of the right film at the right place at the right time.
We're film people.
Yeah.
I cut film on 16 millimeter, so I edited my films by hand. Chie went to photography school in New York. She lived in New York for 10 years, so she was developing photos by hand. And yeah, you're exactly right. I think we were born at the right time where it's like the bridge between analog and digital, so you can appreciate both worlds.
Oh, we can talk. That's another episode. We'll bring you back when you're, not on vacation, and we'll talk about that. So real quick, the comments. Andrew Goins says you seem legit. So there you go. Thanks for and he was giving a lot of support. So Jason's legit. Thanks, Andrew, for that. Deborah Andy Snoo said there's no such thing as a direct translation between English and Japanese. And she talked about her translation efforts, and she works at that, does some stuff with NHK, and it's not easy. And she reiterates that. Great tool, but trust it. Frederick Gun, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. I'm sorry. Gunlach talks about first of all just some of the legalities that as an AI generated translation of a Japanese work, is there no copyright protection? And that's one of the many questions, because I really don't know. We have to Google that. Is it? Like, I don't know. It's very likely that is a loophole. And yes, Jeffrey, I was talking about Hajimete no Otsuka, which is the translation.
Hajimete no Otsukai.
Otsukai. I'm sorry. Yeah, Otsukai.
Right.
Sorry, I can't read. Otsukai. Yeah, that is old enough, and that's what we were talking about here. So, and he was involved with that, I guess, in a certain respect. So, Jeff, thanks to you, because you were our last week's guest, and he came in and wanted to say a little bit of hi to that. And then, and Lillian Chan talked about just the fact that when you live in a country, you need to listen to the Japanese radio, watch Japanese TV, and immerse yourself in the language in order to learn it, and how important that is. So, one last thing. What's next for you, Jason, as we wrap up? What's anything exciting you can talk about?
Well, our company is developing several projects. Of course, another film with Chie Hayakawa, maybe 2 projects with her. I think that relationship will continue for sure. We have another project with a director named Hayakawa. He had a film in Cannes as well called A Pale View of Hills. It's an adaptation of the Ishiguro, his first novel, the British-Japanese author.
Oh,
we
right.
have a film, set in Poland, completely in Polish language, because he studied film in Poland. So that'll be a co-production where it's a Japanese director, but we're actually filming in another culture without any Japanese elements. So that's interesting. We have a short film we're producing with a young Vietnamese female director. We don't usually do short films, but she's a real talent. And that's set in Tokyo, and it's heavily influenced by Dazai. But she's a young Vietnamese art filmmaker who's obsessed with Dazai. So all of our projects are very, unique, in their composition. Right. Everyone, for producers out there, I mean, put your own stamp, your own, bring a lot of yourself to your projects with your collaborators, and you'll automatically stand out. You can't help but stand out when you come together with these various elements.
Jason, thank you so much for being on our show.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Frederick, for putting on that link on our thread in LinkedIn. So take a look at that if you're interested in how copyright and AI works. He's back on vacation, and we're out. We will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Showtime at Japan Expert Insights. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure talking to you guys. It was great talk, great chat.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're looking forward to having you again whenever that is. The sooner the better.
Translation, you could have a whole series on just that, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, creative translation. I'm happy to talk about that anytime.
You got it.
And film.